Hello guys, today I'm going to talk about how to mate our pig, how we can get our pig mated so that they will become pregnant. Yes, I've already made video on this, but I still discover that some of the farmers are still having issues with this very point of mating. It still become a challenge to some farmers around me on how to get their pig mated. When we talk of mating pig, we know that the first thing we must observe is that the pig must be in heat before it is a crossover or taken to the board to be fertilized. Yes, we got some problem that our farmers are facing here, and most of these problems I have made a video on them, and I will still make more videos still on those problems that our farmers are facing. One of these problems is how we can get our pig pregnant, how we can know when they are heat, and how we can make sure that our pig come to heat or our pig is mated and is pregnant. So if you will want to see most of these videos that I make on the problem that we are facing in the farm, in the piggery farm, that means you got to subscribe. Whenever you subscribe, that means all the videos and all the problems I'm going to talk about that we are seeing in our farm, you will be able to see them all. You won't miss any of them when you subscribe. So as I said, today we are talking about how we can get our pig mated. You know that if you cannot get your pig pregnant or fertilized, that means your piggery farm cannot expand. The only way you can make your piggery farm to expand is to make sure that your pig farrows. What I mean by farrows, that give birth to piglet, and from this piglet, that is when your farm will grow. So without your pig getting pregnant or being mated, that means your farm will never grow. So here we are talking about some few points that we must take into consideration so as to ensure that our pig get pregnant. First, before we mate our pig or give it over to the boer to crossbreed, we have to make sure that this pig that we have, that is the gilt that we want to give over to the boer, is up to 6 months old or at least 7. We know that young female pig matures from 5, 6 or 7 months. That is, by this time they will start to heat. But early giving them over so early to the boer may be a problem. So before you give your gilt over to the boer to be crossed, you must make sure that they are up to 6 months or 7 months. This is very, very important. Yes, you have to make sure that they are up to 6 months or 7 months old, or perhaps older, before you think of giving them over to the boer to be fertilized. Yes. So first, you have to make sure that before you give your gilt over to the boer to be fertilized, make sure that they are in heat. How do we know that our pig is in heat? Because without them heating, they will never allow the boer to mount on them. They will keep running around. So first, you have to make sure that your pig is really in heat. Then, how do we know that our pig is in heat? This is the point. Okay? Before we know that our pig is in heat, these are the few points we got to consider. 1. We have to observe that the vulva will swollen, that will swell and become pink in color. The vulva will become pink in color and also swell. Another point is that the pig, that is the gilt, may be restless. Yes, it may feel restless, or sometimes making some sound or begging, making some vocalization sound or baking, knowing that it's looking for the is in heat and is looking for the boa to crossbreed it. Another thing is that this gill that is in heat may, if there were 2 or 3 in the pig pen, the one that is in heat may start mounting or trying to climb the fellow mate in the house. Sometimes may refuse to eat or behave one kind or the other. So with this, you will know that your pig is in heat. And when they are in heat, if you observe that your pig is in heat, you can get into the pigsty, place your hand in the back of the pig that you observe is in heat. If you press your hand in the back, put your hand in the back of the pig, press it harder. If the pig stands still, you know that is in heat and is very much ready for the boa to climb it up. I repeat it again. Get to the pigsty. If you observe that your pig is in heat, press your hand in the back of the pig that you observe is in heat. Press it a little harder. If you press it a little harder and the pig, that is the gill, stands still, did not move, know that is in heat and very much ready to be mounted by the boa. From there, you can take it over to the boa and then to be crossbreed. But we still have some other issues that we also need to consider before we give our pig over to the boa to be crossbreed. Yes, when this pig, if you observe that this pig is in heat, and when you observe that is in heat, you have to make sure that the first day of the heat, you did not give it over to the boa. You must make sure that you give it over to the boa in the 2nd or in the 3rd day, because the days in which your heat pig will be from 2 to 3 days. The heating period is 2 to 3 days. So you do not give it over in the first day. You have to wait. You give it over in the 2nd day or in the 3rd day. In that 2nd day or in the 3rd day, you may try what I've just said. Put your hand in the back of the pig that you observe is in heat. Press it harder. If it stands still, then you know that it's very much ready. Then you give it over to the boa. So if you do this, you will see that you may have more better result. Yes. And when you observe this, if you give it to the boa, you will see that it will stand still and it will be easy for the boa to be able to crossbreed the pig. Yes. So if you put these few tips into consideration, you will see that you will get a little bit improvement in how you get your pig method. I must repeat my point again. For you to be sure that your pig is in heat so that you give it over to the boa, first, make sure that your pig is up to 6 or 7 months old. 2, make sure that the pig is in heat, as you must observe that the vulva become pink and swollen in color, and also swollen, and also make sure that this pig have heated up to 2 days or 3 days because you give it over to the boa. And also you may press your hand in the back of the pig that you observe is in heat. Press it a little bit harder. If it stands still, then you know that it's very much ready. With this, you can give it over to the boa and you will see that it will stand still, and surely the boa will mount it and your pig will get fertilized. Well, that was your green Piggery on your screen talking. If you love this video, you consider subscribing. Bye bye.